Okay, so welcome to Beauty of Colors podcast, Natasha Madden. It is great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Cleanne. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to have this discussion.
Excellent. So, Natasha, tell the audience a little bit about yourself, about your book, and what inspired you to write this book.
Okay, well, if you haven't detected already, I am from the UK, born and raised in London. And I come from a massive family. My parents, they had 5 children. Um, and in London, we was technically classed as living in poverty. And we faced a lot of disadvantages, and I'll expand later on in our discussion. Um, but my disadvantages has kind of shaped the way I see life and my pursuit to my professional career and what I want to achieve in this lifetime. And that's mainly around helping people who are just like me, or who was once in my shoes. So currently I in London work for a borough of London, which is like a small area of London, where I manage a specialist mental health service that's specifically designed to support families where the parents' mental health is impacting their children's well-being and development. And I also do a bit of clinical work around mental health. So about me, I am a parent first and foremost, and I love being a mum. I've got an 11-year-old who's going into that awkward teen stage, but I also have a 1-year-old who's a little boy, and he keeps me very, very busy. In fact, I put on so much weight when I was pregnant, and I lost it all just by running after him. um, I'm also a wife, and yeah, we're due to celebrate our anniversary soon for 3 years. So my husband and I are hard workers in London, and didn't necessarily come from well, I'm speaking for myself. We didn't necessarily come from a support network that supported us in building a good career and thinking things through life and taking next steps and finding the right strategies to help us combat life adversities. And I have found that a personal interest, and I based my professional career around that. And lastly, I would say that I also have a parent who has a severe mental health diagnosis. So my mother, she became schizophrenic when I was 11 years old. So on top of me not being raised with a mother, I became a young carer. And that's where my first interest about like mental health and how that works, how that impacts all other areas of our lives. That's where it first started. It's watching my mother's mental health deteriorate, seeing how the support and the care medically, but also personally and within our own support network, seeing how that was in place and how useful that was and the impact that had across for her own well-being, but also for her children. I've just found myself in a career where I'm playing a different position. Instead of feeling helpless, I want to be helpful. I've done that professionally, but now I want to expand the information and the resources and the techniques and the activities that I use on a day-to-day basis. I just want to expand who I'm reaching and go to a wider audience, which is why I wrote my first book, which is called Useful Life and Self-Organization Skills. I was going to call it some simple, wise words, but this seems a bit more self-explanatory. So that was a lot there. I think I forgot about the question already.
Do you have a copy of the book with you to kind of show?
I do.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I've got the book here and it's drowning by the light. So
Okay.
how to best to show this? So
Mhm.
it's a self-help book.
Okay.
And oh, the
Okay.
light's not.
Yeah, the light is, yeah.
Maybe if I focus this way, I don't know if you can
Okay.
see, but it's a self-help book. It's designed for you to put in your own personal reflections, for you to enter information about your life. This book isn't about me, it's about you as a reader. And some of the techniques that you have in place
Mhm.
to strengthen your support network, to think about creating goals and sustaining those goals or
Mhm.
achieving those goals, to think about how you're looking after yourself, how you're managing stress, um, and just your overall outlook on life. So there's only 7 chapters, and I specifically wrote this book so it can be an easy read. And each chapter should only take maybe up to 10 to 15 minutes. And then the rest is what you put, what you insert as your own entry. So it's just your own reflections and thinking through, hang on, have I thought this through this technique? Have I been able to use like useful skills? Have I been able to really achieve what I want to achieve, or does things kind of fall through the wayside a bit, just because sometimes life gets in the way?
Mhm. So what would you tell the listeners, like the first chapter of the book, like what is it about? Like to give them kind of like an insight into what the first chapter of the book is like.
Well, I've got quite a lengthy introduction there, just because I I've I wanted to explain just in this introduction
Mhm.
my life, where my passions kind of started and grew, and why the type of work I do.
Okay.
And I don't know how you would classify it over there, but over here we call it early intervention,
Okay.
where it's early intervention in mental health, but also on social issues. So uh, the, the the easiest way I can explain this is whenever there's a adversity, a crisis, a challenge that is arising or that we've noticed, the quicker you can put a plan in place, and the quicker you can respond to it and get support, minimizes the impact that that adversity has over your life or more in the long term. So I do clinical work where I work with adults who may have a social issue, or their mental health diagnosis is impacting their well-being, or we've recognized mental health deterioration. And the work we do is we can provide practical and emotional support, but we work with patients to identify a well thought through plan, and create an action plan on how they can overcome this adversity. And we pull from their social networks, and we pull from local services that's available to them, maybe grants, aids, charities. We pull from anything to encourage that person, and also to maximize the likelihood of somebody facing that adversity, and being able to overcome that challenge.
Okay. So,
So,
mhm,
sorry,
go
no,
ahead.
no, go ahead.
So what inspired you to write the book? Because you at the beginning you talked about yourself, and you talked about your life story, and you talked about your mom. What really inspired you to write the story? Was it because of the way you were brought up, your life story, or was your mom? Was she the main person that influenced you or gave you that drive to write the book?
I think my mum was always my seed. I like to talk openly about mental health and the impact that it has, not just on the individual, but the family, the people around somebody who's experiencing any form of a mental health challenge, an issue, a crisis. It does impact the loved ones around you. With my mother's story, there was a plethora of opportunities where she had the right support, perhaps she wouldn't have experienced such a unraveling of her mental health. Research tells us there's always, we're more vulnerable to particular issues such as like alcoholism, gambling, mental health deterioration. There's so many research that tells us that we can be more vulnerable to those things, and we have to think about how we protect ourselves, or how we manage our lives that minimize that risk. And for my mother, there was plenty of things that she could have done, or had she accessed the right support, or been able to utilize information out there for herself, then perhaps she could have avoided experiencing such deterioration in her mental health. So my mother was the seed in my career, and that really harnessed my interest in what you can do to support yourself, to support your family, and I just began to look systematically at what was in place here in London. Over the years, I have no idea how many people I've worked with and how many families I've worked with. I couldn't even, it's definitely in the thousands, but I've worked with families and individuals, patients, in different capacities, and also in different roles. So I'm able to really I was just fortunate enough to have really in-depth conversations with different people about how they found themselves in the midst of their adversities. I was really able to understand their willingness, their determination to overcome things, or if they were experiencing burnt out or anxiety or feeling overwhelmed. I was able to understand their social support networks. I was able to understand the wider impact things had on their children, perhaps their parents, and themselves. And we over here we use tools in clinical work, so we're able to kind of evidence where somebody is with their mental health, and then these tools you can generically access through your local GP. So I'm trying to think of the American version of a GP, which would just probably be like your doctor. So yeah. So the work that I have done, I've used such an array of tools where I'm able to capture the impact and see where somebody is, where we're at the point of working with them, and then where we are, where they are, where their well-being is, when we have hopefully achieved everything that we have agreed to achieve. And obviously there's loads of improvements. And what I found is, through working with so many people, that there was common themes that kept reoccurring, and each chapter are about those common themes. And there was also exercises that I would frequently use, which produce the best outcomes. And each of those exercises are attached to those common themes. So the first chapter is about stress management. Almost every single individual I ever meet have no idea about how many stresses they carry from the day to day. We wake up and we become numb to the life that we're experiencing, because it just becomes matter of fact. But it's so important that we take some time and reflect on on everything, every single thing that may be causing us to think about that more than we should. It makes us have a physical reaction to that specific worry. And I mean, I can tell you mine, but usually when I probe and I probe and I push for individuals to really think about all of their stress, which we call stress risk indicators, but anything that's causing them stress, usually they could name 5 at first, and after our conversation, they could probably name like over 100. And it's just realizing you wake up with those stresses each day, and what do you do to manage that, and how can you prepare for the big one? What do you do? What happens when something needs 100% of your attention and feels 100% consuming, and you've got the rest of the 99 stresses that you have to deal with? What one do you prioritize? So it's just about having a good understanding of what you carry day to day. And I use an exercise that helps facilitate that conversation. And start looking at different ways we can manage our stresses, encouraging individuals and you as a reader to try new things. So I've got a catalogue as well of things that you can put in place and incorporate that into your routine and measure your well-being. Measure, does this work? Because we tend to be kind of creatures of habit, so we just do what we think, what we're used to. But actually, if we take a moment to reflect, is that the best thing? For me individually, is that the most useful way that I can really take maybe any sort of anxious feelings I have from a 10 right down to a 2? We don't know, but you should know. Why not discover this? Wouldn't it be great if you knew maybe at this age, or 35, 40, 50, 60, 21, that you're going to face such a massive loss, or you're going to face such a situation that's really going to impact your well-being? Wouldn't you like to know the best way, the absolute best way to manage your stress, to really kind of support your well-being? So then why not use today to figure that out? And so we start with the first chapter. It starts with that, encourages you to look at your stressors and think through your plans and figure out what's the best way to manage your load, what's the best exercise, activity, routine that you could do to incorporate in your routine, and that has the best impact.
Okay, so your book is kind of like a study guide and a help book and everything in one.
Yes.
Okay, so it's telling the listeners what to do and how to deal with their stress and what they can do step by step in order to get through the process.
So I refer back to people that I work with often, or that I have worked with often, just because in the many years, I've had over 15 years of experience working with individuals in this capacity, where I'm able to really understand how complex their circumstances are and the impact that has on their well-being, on their mental health, and any long-term impact that has on their life. So with these exercises, I discuss, this is commonly what I find. This is what has worked for some, and this has probably been like the best way of managing this. I call it useful because not all information we have and that's made available to us is as common as we think, or we think it's like common sense. But I call it useful because when I was growing up, my mother, she was unavailable to mother me due to her own mental health. And my father was riddled and with debt and had to work all hours just to pay for our household, as he had 5 kids to provide for, and he also had medical expenses due to my mother. And there were so many things that he had to figure out. So in essence, I grew up without really having parents who would show me what is the best way to manage my own well-being, what is the best way to choose a friend, how do I look after myself. And that's the impact having an absent parent can have. But not all parents have to be absent. Some parents are there and they show you their strategies, but it isn't necessarily the right strategies, especially as every single year the modern world is completely complex, and it doesn't quite apply to today's world. But not only that, I mean, if you've noticed your parents' struggles with friendships, how could they teach you how to choose a friend? And if you've noticed your parent may struggle with managing their own stress, or shouting all the time, or they're taking it out on people, or they need to take medication to really just manage the symptoms, then how can they teach you the best way to manage your own well-being? So supporting you as a reader to look at your circumstances and really figure out, is this the best way for me? What has worked for other people, and like, why is this a common issue, and then why would this be a useful exercise that I can implement myself to overcome this sort of issue in my life? Hopefully, I mean, if you have something in place already that works great, but works really well for you, great. This book is also about recognizing, your achievements and your ability to be resilient. But if you don't have anything in place, or you don't have the best technique, then now's the time to implement some changes, see if they work for you before you face the next life of adversities, because life is filled with ups and downs, and we're going to face it at some point in our life. And having the right support network behind you, knowing how to look after yourself, knowing how to manage your stress, all of these things will minimize the impact any adversity has over your life, because you're better prepared for them. So yeah, I just wanted to encourage better self-preparation for life's adversities. And me writing this book, I mean, I manage a service and I work with a whole team of staff where we talk a lot about well-being, we put things in place, and we deliver this locally to some of the residents that's in that particular borough we serve in London. However, that is only for that borough and anybody that comes across our service. So I wrote this book because one of my life's ambition is to help as many people as I can, and more so help as many teenagers and children who are once in my shoes, as much as I possibly can. And through writing a book and being able to promote the book and promote well-being, and hopefully somebody can take something away and be able to access this independently without having to be a part of the specific area that I serve, or be eligible for our service. So yeah, this is the start of me being able to capture some of the, really useful information, and being able to distribute it to those who need it.
Okay, sounds good. That's a lot of information in a nutshell. So where can the purchasers, the people who are listening, where can they purchase your book? How can your book be accessible to them?
So if you just go on Amazon and you type in my name, Natasha Manning, or the title of the book, which is Useful Life and Self-Organization Skills, you should be able to just order it straight to you. It is available on Kindle. However, I do encourage everybody to get a hard copy sent to them, and physically write down their ideas, and use a pen, and keep this workbook for you, and almost journal and write your thoughts down. Journaling is a way that we can offload and express, and really reflect and come back to. And there's something about looking at a screen that doesn't quite tick that box for me, that I've been able to fully let go. And there's something about seeing my own handwriting every time I look into any notes that I make, that really make that unique to me. So I think that's a better way of being able to really get the most out of this book. It's just get a hard copy sent to you. And so anybody in the world, luckily through Amazon, is able to purchase it, and get it sent to them, and just learn some really useful techniques and activities that they can incorporate. And it's not that hard to incorporate. A lot of it is just kind of refreshing, introducing some new ideas, but that's commonly known. And knowing how to put that together and implement that into your life, and get the most out of it. Think about sometimes it's the questions we ask ourselves that can produce a different thought, and that encourages a new reflection. So yeah, if you can purchase it, do. And what I have said is that I really kind of encourage parents as well to have a look at purchase one, and have a look at themselves, what techniques they put in place, because children, they don't do what you tell them to do, they do what they see you doing. And yeah, and whether you like it or not, or whether you're aware of this or not, they pick up exactly how you run your life, and they use those same techniques you have. And if what you have in place isn't the most effective, then maybe now it's time to just do that bit of reflection and figure out the better way of managing your life, and managing how your well-being, and encouraging your children to do the same, which promotes their well-being. Because if you think about it, in the last 50 years, the world has become so complex.
Oh yeah.
So complex.
Yeah.
It's great in one sense. We have access to a lot of information, and the quality of information has got so much better, but it can become overwhelming, and we don't know where to put our attentions to. And my biggest point that I like to point out to parents: look, whatever we face in life, and we can't predict, we wasn't even able to predict we'll face a pandemic. But the best thing you could do for yourself and to teach your children is know how to look after yourself, and know how to manage your well-being, and get the most out of yourself, and get the most out of life. That's the best thing. Looking after yourself and understanding your well-being, understanding your strengths, understanding your weaknesses, understanding where needs attention, understanding where needs routine, where needs support, how you can get that guidance and support. Just looking after yourself and your well-being is the number one thing that we should be doing to equip our children to face tomorrow.
That is true. I agree with that. That is true. So who is the book made for?
So the book is made for anyone with a conscience. So and that is personal, isn't it? Because that can't quite be measured. But I think it's useful for young teenagers who are just learning about life, and learning how to manage their life. Why not have some useful strategies from the very beginning? And it can go right up through to parents, to grandparents. The book is not specific to any gender, and it's not specific to any age. It's just anybody that understands. It's for anybody that understands life and has to start living their life independently.
Well said, Natasha. So, is there anything that you want to leave with the readers? You want to tell them, the listeners, give them some more information about the book, or is there any last words of encouragement that you want to leave with the listeners?
Okay. Well, hi, listeners. Thanks for tuning in. And I hope that you found this discussion useful, and it's starting to allow you to think and reflect on some of the strategies you have in place now, and how useful that is in managing your life. I really hope that you pick up the book and apply it to yourself. I have a page that you can contact me on called Pathways to You. So it's literally at Pathways, the number two, and then YOU on Instagram. And I love, it's just a mental health, positive, motivational page. And I love talking just around mental health, and making sure that any sort of social media you have positive content that you're exposing yourself to every day. And I like to do that. But also, that I wanted to kind of leave you with this story on what motivated me to write chapter two, which was that it's about your support network and how to choose a good support network. And it's got the best exercise I used with different patients and families on how to do this. And we use an acronym around clothes. The same way you pick your wardrobe is the same for different seasons, should be the same way you pick your friends, or you choose your friends. You lean on support for different adversities. And it's got a good question style on how you can, to help you really kind of reflect on whether somebody in your support network should be there. And the reason why I chose that is because, long story short, I worked with a family recently where the mother had a similar upbringing to me. She had a parent who had a very complex mental health need, where she was a young carer. She was raised in a poor household, and she had a limited support network. And there was just loads of I really kind of identified with this particular uh, individual we were supporting. And I, coming away from that meeting, I reflected and thought, what is the difference between her and I? Because we as professionals were supporting her, well, I was standing in for one of my staff, but we were supporting her with being in a violent relationship, where there was loads of physical violence, coercion, and control. She was riddled with debt, and she was really struggling with meeting her children's needs. She really struggled with how to even pick a friend. She told all the friends that she had frequent contact with, she couldn't trust them, or they were unreliable. And I left that session and came home that night and wrote chapter two, because I understood the difference between her and I was that I just had a slightly different support network, where I lent on my external family and friends, where I lent on my teenage boyfriend's family.
Mhm.
And I just would ask loads of questions. If he was around me growing up, I would say, how do you manage your money? How do you do this? How do you do that? Why do you do this? Or why do you, I just ask loads of questions, because I never was given that advice from my own parental network, and my own parental support. And I also have a twin sister, and we're identical. So we would constantly have these discussions, and we would support each other and really kind of push each other through anything that we faced. And she was strong in the areas that I was weak, and vice versa. And that was a really good way that I could reflect on myself and my position and my perception on life. Um, but that was just a small difference. the small difference is perhaps an uncle gave me some advice about choosing friends. And I mean, we were sitting on completely different sides of the table in terms of how we're experiencing life right now. And I'm not saying that to, share that, to kind of put myself on a pedestal, and I hope I don't come across that way. I'm sharing that because I really identified with her, and I did think, gosh, if I didn't have that small guidance, perhaps my life would be quite similar to how she lives her life today. And because that can easily happen. You can easily, meet the wrong person, who distracts you. You could find yourself in the circumstances that can be quite consuming. Um, so I went home, I wrote chapter 2, and just around choosing your support network. And I want to make it clear that some of the advice that I give in the book is just common, practical, the best useful strategies, but it's not commonly known. And if you don't have the right support network, or if you don't have people talking to you about just useful skills in how to manage your life, then now's the time that you can find these things out for yourself. You have access to a world of resources, useful information, and I hope my book is one of useful information in you being able to really unpick like how to manage your life in a way that works for you. So that, long story short, that's a long long-winded way of just saying, yeah, I really hope that you have a read or start thinking about reflecting on your own life, and maybe access some free resources. If you do go to my Instagram page, if you register with us, you can access a specific chapter around gratitude, and that's for free as well. So if at least you might get something out of this conversation. Yeah, but thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. I wish you all the success in your life and on your journey tomorrow. And I'm sending you loads of love and light.
Well, thank you, Natasha. I think we all should get a copy of your book. We all need that in our lives, a guide and a help into especially what the world is right now, what we're going through. And with COVID-19, we all need that self-care and that help to get us through tough times, especially stress. And a lot of people are going through depression, and there's a lot going on. So your book is a lifesaver. So I am saying I'm going to put your link in on the YouTube channel and on the podcast, so the listeners can get a copy of your book, and hopefully they can reach out to you and let you know how the book have impacted their lives, and what changes they have made in their lives. Okay, so it was nice having you on the show, Natasha.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed this. So thank you.
You're welcome.